So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Emily Servais. I'm an associate director here of community management at EJF, and I will be your host. So today we have a jam-packed session with a panel of experts in community association management. Back in January, we asked for your questions, our board members, on the things that you have always wanted to ask, never found time to ask, or you were just unsure even who to ask. So we asked you to ask us anything. So at the end of this panel session, we will have time for Q&A. So feel free as the panelists talk to drop questions in the chat. And at the end, I will pull those up and read them out loud for our panelists to answer. This session is being recorded, and the recording is going to be posted to our website afterwards, in addition to being emailed out. So you'll have access to it there. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to now share my screen. All right. So first up, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Jane Rogers here to talk about legal matters. She is a partner with Whitford, Taylor, and Preston. We have Lisa Coffey from our finance corner. She is the director of community finance at EJF. We have Sarah Steele, project management corner, director of project administration here at EJF. And then we also have, Mira Brown, community manager corner, director of internal operations here at EJF. So let's get started with our first question. All right, number one. We are a 35-unit community. The sense of community needs a boost. Any universals on that subject? So Mira, you can go ahead and give us your thoughts on that.
So, hi everyone, I'm Mira Brown with EJF. And so my first piece of advice on this is start small. Like, don't try to get all 35 owners involved. Look at them to try and get 4 or 5 people involved, right? Maybe throw a coffee event in the lobby, right? One morning, I'll bet you your local coffee shop will actually support this. Ask them to send over, a box of Joe and some cups. And a couple board members, doesn't need to be the whole board. One board member sits in the lobby and offers free coffee to people. Or, a social on your roof deck if you have it. It really depends on what kind of association you have, right? Your layout. But also meet people where they are. We're all on Zoom right now and very comfortable with it. Maybe you have an online social, right? But if your association skews towards the in-person when you're trying to drive engagement really does do more for you, right? So the other idea is to invite people in. Send out some surveys. Like, what do you want us to do? How would you like to meet your neighbors? I saw a great suggestion. One of my associations has a book club, right? Put it out there. I'm reading, whatever. I'm currently reading Wuthering Heights, you guys. Like, I don't know about you. It's not my favorite book so far, but maybe you put it out there that, hey, the board's going to read this book this month. Does anybody want to talk about it? So just try to find the places where your association is and be there for them. Don't expect people to come to you, right? Put yourself out there. And like I said, ask them what they want to see. Ask them what they want to talk about. And that's kind of my advice for the start. We have some more in-depth questions about like meetings and things like that. But for just general sense of community, my biggest piece of advice is make yourself available and be where people are in your association. So
Awesome. Thank you. Next question. This is for Jane. The board isn't following the governance documents. What can I do?
Well, everyone, this is the question we face constantly when working with community associations. I'm an attorney and I represent many community associations in the DC and in the region, and this comes up constantly. So almost all governing documents provide the ultimate remedy, which is for the worst case scenario. There are mechanisms under your governing documents, particularly under condominiums, condominium governing documents, to remove board members if the board is not really doing bad things. But that's usually not the case. Usually there is a much more less intrusive and more productive way of addressing these issues. One of them, I'm assuming this question is coming from someone who's not a member of the board. But if you are a member of the board asking the question, well, then you really, as that minority player, if you see your fellow board members not going down the right path, you really need to let them know when you disagree. You need to put it on the record that you're not agreeing with the path that they're taking and the reasons why. Depending on the nature of the issues that are you believe need to be addressed, it's often more effective to document your concerns in writing. So you're making a record of what the concerns are, so that in the future, if the board doesn't sort of get on the right pathway, you'll have you've made a record of the concerns that you had all along. And you'd be surprised when challenged, many board members, they think they're doing the right thing oftentimes, or they believe it based on advice they had in the past, or this is the way we've always done it. That may not be the right way, but they did it in good faith, believing that this was the way it was supposed to be done. Sometimes you just need to call your attorney or get the board to say, hey, can we have our attorney come in and advise us on this topic? So as a board, get the advice from the attorney so the board can ensure that it's actually doing its fiduciary duty and following the right path. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Boards get in a habit, and boards get, which sometimes you have board members who've served for many years and they've always done it a certain way, and they just don't realize it's not always the right way. So look at all your options, seek the advice of counsel when you need to, and hopefully you can work it out.
Thank you, Jane. I agree. Always seeking legal counsel guidance. Best way to go. Even if you're just interpreting documents, not sure, legal counsel always best bet. I know people are saying that there is an echo. Everyone should be on mute. And it sounds like when someone's presenting that there is an echo. So I did mute everyone. So just panel, as we talk, take yourself, go on to mute if you're not talking. Hopefully it'll fix itself. Not sure what's going on. Technology. Next question. This one is for Lisa. What are the most common red flags on a financial statement that a board member should be able to spot immediately?
Are you going to put up the answer? There we go. Perfect. So hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Coffey, Director of Association Finance. And so this is an excellent question, actually. And these are the flags that we should be looking for as we go through our day, week, and month. So to me, the number one red flag is operating deficits. At the beginning of the year, our fiscal year, whatever it is, we spend time and talk about what we need for cash flow for the association. We put considerable effort into it and we implement it. So we should be performing to that budget. So if we have operating deficits and or negative variances, meaning we've overspent in one category or another, R&M is $20,000 over budget or something like that, then this is, to me, a red flag. Did we not plan for it? Is it a surprise? Because we all know there are surprises. So if expenses, if a one-off expense goes, if we do have a surprise and the expense goes negative one time, we can recover from that over the year. But if we consistently see that we're exceeding what we budgeted, and the income is falling short, we're going to put ourselves in a deficit position permanently. And our bills need to get paid. We need to pay our insurance and our utilities and our contracts and all of that. So that would be my first red flag, and to have a look at and discussion about these negative variances every month. My second red flag would be low cash flow, low cash balance. Ideally, best practice indicates that we should have 2 times monthly assessments in our operating account at all times. This allows us for the smooth and timely payment of our bills as they come due. and also keeps us from borrowing from our reserves to pay our operating, which is to me also it's a pink flag, right? We shouldn't need to borrow from our reserves to pay for our operating if we're operating under best practice, which is keeping the proper cash balance in our operating account. So cash balance is my second red flag. And then my third red flag is underfunding the reserves and having a lack of capital, both capital itself and capital planning. Best practice suggests that we should have a reserve study. I would like to see every association have a current reserve study and be funding to that. This will eliminate some of the surprises that we get, and also prepare us to care for and maintain this common asset that we all own in good condition. So that would be my third red flag, underfunding reserves. So the bottom line is a healthy association maintains stable operations, positive cash flow, and a fully funded reserve. If one of those pillars fails, it puts at risk the association, and the board must step in and act.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think, just having gone through budgeting season and looking closely at cash flow, talking about, how to properly plan for capital, reserve funds and capital improvement planning. Mira, maybe you could talk quickly about, what are great ways for a board to look at having to increase funding, which also comes with increased condo fees, right? And then needing to talk with our client, your residents in the building, and how to pitch that to them about the importance of making sure you're appropriately funding through assessments.
So I'll say honestly, a lot of associations get scared of their reserve study because a lot of times you get back, you need 12 times the reserves that you're trying to get to. So a staged approach is very what I usually try to tell my team. I've seen several associations where it's let's do a small special assessment now to boost our reserves and then commit to a certain percentage along the way to get to where we're supposed to be. And I think it's really a now or later kind of discussion. So if we start now building up our reserves, later we won't have a big special assessment. And I will also say, know your audience. I have associations that would rather special assess, right? They want to have their lower condo or HOA fees going through and understand that, one day I might have to stroke a 10K check, right? So, but I think that's really the discussion that I tend to have is, look, guys, we can address it now or we can address it later, but eventually you're going to need that new roof or that new road. So I think, and Lisa, I want to highlight something that Lisa said. I wrote it down. Common asset, right? We all own this together. We're all in this together and we're acting in the best interest. This webinar is targeted at board members, so you all know this, but we're acting in the best interest of the association as a whole. So yeah, it hurts. We need this money, but I also don't need the roof to cave in. So that's my idea is it's this now or later when you're in these discussions.
Great. Next question.
If I can, Mara, just to return to the topic of special assess versus reserve, I think that's a great point. Some associations would rather special assess as this money is targeted to that project. It's not operating funds. It's not normal association assessments. It is targeted. So it's a valid approach, but it requires us to be stealthy and get that in place quickly, especially when you have an emergency type thing that you're raising money for. So, this entails discussing about we need to raise this money fast. We need to raise it from everybody in order to get the full amount that we need to fix, say it's the roof. So it comes with caveats, but it is, in my estimation, Mara, also a very valid way to fund projects.
Right. And I know, Emily, don't shoot me because I know we're on a time crunch, but one last thing on this, what Lisa said, if you have to raise the money quick, that can be hard. So maintaining a certain reserve balance is important. I understand that some associations do like to special assess, but yes, there does come the time when, oh gosh, the roof is about to cave in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and just sorry, Emily, one more little tidbit. So recently I had an association faced with that very issue. And so what we did was we created a hybrid. We took some of the down payment, get it going money from the existing reserve and then we special assess the balance. So we can find ways that make it more, it's never going to be comfortable, but make it more comfortable, given the resources that we have and how we can get something going and then pay for it, or use the component pieces of all the different things that we have to our benefit. That's the whole point of having the reserves. This is for our benefit, for the association's benefit. So, okay, I'll shut up now.
No, I think this is a great question. It's a question that every board faces. And I think if anyone's going through this or they're just unsure, how to look at their financial package, how to raise funds, definitely reach out to your CAM, set up a meeting with the CAM and CFM, and you guys can figure out the best approach there. All right, next question is for Sarah Steele. What are the most critical hidden infrastructure issues like drainage or structural integrity that boards often ignore in favor of curb appeal? This is a good question.
It is a great question. Again, I'm Sarah Steele. I oversee the CapEx and insurance claim division here at EJF. We do all the project management for those big projects that Mira and Lisa were just talking about. So thinking about this question, I think of things that relate to water, okay? And that's your interior plumbing, your foundational waterproofing, and your exterior facade maintenance. And so that's, water inside, under, and around you. A lot of folks, especially in buildings that are older, that we find often here in DC, they don't understand that the construction of their building includes materials that don't last forever, right? And so you may have galvanized steel pipes because your building was built before, the 1960s, and those are known to deteriorate and develop pinhole leaks. Copper doesn't last forever. And so copper pipes in your walls can deteriorate over time. And something that folks don't recognize is that your pipes can be subject to galvanic or dielectric corrosion, right? And that's when the pipe touches a different metal and they're incompatible. And so it causes the copper pipes to corrode. And I raise all this because oftentimes I'm called into a building, hey, we've got this weird leak in the wall, we don't know where it's coming from. And that's where you start to have to look at your risers in their entirety. You also, the cast metal pipes also don't last forever. And so paying attention to these random leaks that come up and recognize that might be a sign that the other infrastructure within the building is starting to deteriorate, and that would need to be addressed. Foundational waterproofing. That doesn't last forever as well. And then in older buildings, you don't know what was used because, the current building code wasn't even, fully put into place until the mid-90s. So it's kind of a crapshoot as to how your building was built before that, because there were so many different bodies trying to govern it that you never really know which rules that the contractors followed. So if you are noticing that in your subgrade levels that you have dampness, moisture, sometimes I see active just water infiltration, that indicates that you have a bigger problem. Not only does it cause an interior problem with mold and mildew and things like that, but it's also deteriorating your foundation walls. The more moisture and wet there, the more the faster your concrete block or your masonry block is going to deteriorate. And then for the facade, if you have random leaks in units in the wall, leaks around windows are understandable, but and easy to identify. But sometimes you just get random leaks in the middle of a wall. That should indicate to you that you've got some type of issue with your mortar and your brick building. Or if you have a different type of envelope with like metal panels or whatever, the joints and things like that could have an issue. Please plan to replace the sealants in your building. That's one of the most common issues that I see, is that folks start to complain about leaks or be concerned about leaks. And it's because they haven't changed the sealants, which is basically the caulk around the window or at various joints for 20 years. It doesn't last that long. It needs to be on a routine maintenance schedule. And so those just don't ignore any issues that relate to water, whether it be inside, under, or around your building.
Thank you, Sarah. I think, one of the biggest things here in DC, there's a lot of turn of the century buildings, and everyone, I think, is particularly are those with brick buildings. It's not fun to have to do repointing projects and consider that, but, it's important over, maybe doing a landscape overhaul. And I think going to the last question, which was more towards financial planning and red flags and stuff, planning for those long-term capital improvement projects to make sure that you can tackle the curb appeal along with these capital improvement projects. And that's just all comes down to financial planning. Okay, next question. This one is for Mira. With spring around the corner, what should we be doing at our association to get ready for the shift of the season?
Okay, so this obviously is highly dependent on what kind of association you have, right? You have homeowners associations that are spread out or townhome communities, then you have high-rise communities, and then in between you have the garden styles. So my biggest piece of advice, find your drains and make sure they're clear, right? So April showers bring May flowers, and April showers bring April floods if you're not careful. So depending on where you are and what kind of place you have, that's my very first biggest piece of advice is make sure your drains are clear. Make sure your hoses are back on, right? Hopefully you winterized your hoses so you didn't have big floods over the winter when things froze. Make sure your water flows freely now because you want to be able to water your pretty flowers. The other thing for our HOA friends on the line, I say it's time to look at your tree trimming, right? Call your arborist, call your landscaper. Take a look at your trees and make sure that as we do start getting into April showers, which tend to be windy, you've got your trees all taken care of and you're not, suddenly hit by some widowmaker branch that's going to take out a bunch of things. So those are my basics. Again, it is highly dependent on how big, what kind of association you're looking at, right? So the other thing, a lot of people, I know as a personal homeowner, I changed my batteries and my smoke detectors on daylight savings both times. So that's another thing to kind of put on your docket. And then spring cleaning. I know the association I manage every spring, we do the carpets and the marble and the windows. And so those are just some, as we get out from underneath this lovely ice storm we've had, and we're not going to have salt anymore. I'm sure all of you are looking around your associations and seeing that crust of salt and going, when is this going to go away? So think about that as you're planning, as well as while we're in the still colder months, get your plan for March and April for cleaning up and spritzing up around your association.
Sorry about that. Forgot to hit the answer there. And also just to add on to that, also a great opportunity to meet with your CAM, go over that operational calendar for the association. And, I always around budget season, we try and look at that operational calendar anyway and make sure, revamp it, fine tune it, make sure it meets the needs of the association. Preparing for spring, another good opportunity to do that too. All right. Next question is for Sarah Steele. We have a large CapEx project coming up and the contractor has an add-on fee for a surety bond. What is that and should we get one? Wait, Sarah, you're on mute.
Technology. And larger projects, you'll most often see this. A surety bond is a general classification for a type of insurance that you can procure that ensures that the contractor pays who they're supposed to pay, and that they perform the work, or that the work is performed according to their contractor scope. I have seen buildings who have been bitten in the butt in the past. And so they're very concerned and they don't want to have things that have happened before happen again. And so they look towards these surety bonds to gives them some peace of mind. There is an expense and it is the owner's expense. And so, surety, the rates for these bonds tend to be anywhere from 2 to 8% of the construction cost. So it's not inexpensive, especially if you have a larger project. But it is worthwhile if it's something that is going to give the peace of mind to the board and its and the association members to know that should the contractor fold and they don't pay the subcontractors or the suppliers, but you've paid that contractor, the bond will step in and make sure everybody gets paid. Or if for some reason the contractor isn't able to complete the project, then the bond will cover the whatever it takes to get somebody in to complete the work. And so typically in a bid sheet, you'll have that section as to how much what percentage would be charged for a payment bond or a performance bond. It's also very telling if you're comparing 5 different contractors and you've got, I normally see it in the 2 to 3% range, but if you've got a contractor that's kind of 4, 5, 6, then that's telling, because the bond rate that they get is issued by the insurance company, and that's an indication as to how experienced that contractor is and what their credit rating is. So it is certainly something to pay attention to from that perspective as well.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Next question is for Lisa Coffey. Why doesn't reserve interest or our capital project spend appear on the monthly financials? Also a good question.
So the short answer is because I said so. No, because because your P&L is your operational activity. Your reserve fund is held on your balance sheet. So that's the short answer. So on your P&L, your statement of expenses and revenues and expenses, this is your budget. This is what we based this on your budget. We sat with the budget. We thought about all the different things that we're going to need to fund and operate the association, and we loaded them into this, and that's how we track them. So this is your operational budget. It has nothing to do with your reserves. We should separate and segregate and keep separate funds for operating from funds from reserves. We don't want to be using our reserve funds to pay operating expenses. We want our operating expense and our operating financials to stand on their own and pay for themselves. So operating financials are your day-to-day, everyday expenses, utilities, insurance, R&M contracts, admin expenses, the like. These are known, and so included in our operating budget. The reserve is based upon your reserve study, and it's funding for projects that are coming down the road based on that reserve study, and as such is segregated. So from the accounting of it, it's treated as on the balance sheet as part of the reserve fund, and your operating is on your P&L as part of your operating fund. So if you think about it as 2 different funds, it makes it a little bit easier to square with. So the interest that you earn, there is no interest earned on an operating account. So the operating fund does not earn interest. The reserve account does. And that's one way to build our reserves, is to accrue interest. And it's one of the reasons why my CFM team will push and suggest and look at and investigate better ways to invest reserve funds to get a better yield. So it is one way to build reserves in addition to the contributions that we make each month to our reserve fund per our reserve study. So your reserve contributions, your reserve interest, your reserve spending, and therefore the balance is all reported on your balance sheet, separate from the operating financials, which are your day in, day out, everyday operations. So net is, because they're different funds, think of it as an operating fund and a reserve fund, and keep them separate.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, clear answer there. All right. The next question is for Mira Brown. What's a typical day for a CAM look like? I like this question.
So, I mean, sarcastically, it's chaos. Like, I'll put that out there. And I like to tell everybody that one of the reasons I like this job is that it's never the same day to day, right? So your average morning might wake up to the elevator went out at this building. There's a plumbing leak at that building. Why do I need to have this special assessment at this building? And then my favorite are the governance disputes between owners. So having been in this business for way longer than I like to admit, but somewhere around 25 years, I like to joke with my boards that they get a gold star if they can bring me a new issue, right? So the answer is jack of all trades, master of none. A lot of times, we're getting called on to be Angie's List, right? Mira, I need somebody to work on my AC, or I want to replace my wallpaper. I had that one recently. Do you know have a good wallpaper dealer? And I was like, no, I don't. But I'll ask my colleagues, right? And so I think a lot of what my day looks like is for me helping others in our office with their questions. But for a lot of CAMs, it's reaching out and just saying, I don't know what to do here, right? Or looking up the answer themselves. But it's kind of a juggler. It's prioritizing, and it's not only prioritizing what on my plate is important, but prioritizing what on each board's plate should be important. I find I frequently get caught up in different members of the board thinking that certain things are more important than others and having to say, guys, I understand that the paint color in the hallway means a lot to you, but the leak in unit 405 means a lot to the owners in 405, right? So I think that's probably my biggest thing, a traffic cop or air traffic controller of finding the projects, identifying the priorities, and then helping to execute. And I think more and more as we've gotten into this modern age of management, it's just communicating. It's being available. It's trying to be able to answer everything all at once. But that, and again, that gets back to this traffic cop of saying I know, board A, I understand that this is important to you, but I really have to take care of board B right now, and I will be back to you soon. So I think a lot of what we do is managing expectations that I can't do all the things, but here's something that you can work on in the background while I'm working with this. And like, I will get back to you just as soon as possible. So more and more lately, I think my job is chief communicator. Because I don't actually execute. Actually, I do want to say that. I think that this is a moment for me to dispel myths. The board executes, right? I can only advise. And the number of times I've had to say to non-board member clients that are calling me that are upset about something, I'm really sorry, but this is the association's decision. I'm just doing what the association decided for me to do, right? And so I think that that is something that gets lost in the sauce sometimes. That the board, you guys are so important, and thank you, your volunteers. And so I just want to put that out there that we will do everything we can to advise you and guide you. But at the end of the day, you guys are the A players. You guys are the ones that are executing. And so just want to put that out there that's really we serve in an advisory capacity, and we'll do our best in that and we'll raise our hands, and Jane knows this. I've raised my hand and said, guys, this is not a good idea. I don't think you should do it. But ultimately, if you think that I'm crazy and you want to do it, you're going to do it, right? So that's what it is. The typical day for CAM is a hummingbird flitting from thing to thing and just trying to make sure that we're investing in the right places. So, and what about you? Because Emily, you're more on the ground managing associations than me these days. So do you have anything?
No, yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, I think, being that expert communicator, whether it's communicating with the board directly, communicating with the vendor, communicating with the resident, I always tell my assistant, we're working through a project, it's like the holy trinity of communication, right? You have a work order come in, right, for a leak. Okay, we need to let the board know. We need to call a vendor. We need to communicate with the owner. We need to maybe communicate with the whole tier, right? So it's constantly thinking about, okay, who do we need to contact about this issue? So it is a lot of communication. And I know board members, I often, we talk with you and you get overwhelmed by the amount of communication, because it is a lot of communication. And so I think, yeah, it's just learning how to prioritize, how to organize yourself internally, and then also being open and honest with you guys, our boards, our clients, when something should take precedent over another. Obviously, like Mira said, you're ultimately the deciders on that, but we will always try and voice our opinion and steer you in the direction of what should be prioritized over something else. So but no day is the same, and no issue is ever the same either. We draw on past experiences. I was selling a board this recently. I had a situation. I was like, I've never really dealt with this particular thing before, but I've had 5 other similar scenarios. So I'm going to take all that experience, put it together, and give you an idea of how best to move forward. So it definitely keeps you on your toes. You are constantly learning. All right. Next question is for Jane. What is the role of the board?
Well, this is a big question, and one we have to answer in some way or another almost every day, as do all the EJF personnel who are dealing with boards all the time. You run into this issue. The bottom line is the board is the governing body for whatever the common interest community forum is you have. You're elected a co-op board member or a condo board member or an HOA board member. And each different type of common interest community has certain limitations on the powers of the board. Bottom line, you're to make the decisions that govern the day-to-day operations of the community. And most of those are decisions that you can make alone. But your governing documents tell you what your powers are. All of them do. In some way, it's in your articles or your certificate of incorporation for a co-op. It's in your bylaws. It's in your declaration for an HOA. One of the governing documents gives you the answer. In addition, statutes such as the DC Condominium Act has specific powers and responsibilities that it sets forth are part of the responsibilities and powers of the board of directors, 42-1903.08, for example, the Condominium Act. But you have to look at all of them. And so just as the first thing you should do as a board member, you're a new member of the board, is to figure out just what your responsibilities are. One thing that they're not is you're not to be implement. You're the decision maker. So you're making the decisions on how to implement the budget, how to approve contracts that come within the ambit of your budget constraints, how to deal with whatever situation comes up. You're the decision maker, but you have to coordinate with your management team and let them implement your decisions. So they're the implementer, you're the decision maker. And try not to, a lot of boards will try to get, and depending on the size of your association, may have an elaborate structure of management team, in-house, out-house, all those teams are different depending on the nature of your particular community association. So some boards have to get more involved in the day-to-day management decisions because they don't have a huge management team supporting them. But for the most part, remember, you're the decision maker. Your management team, as whatever that is the one who's supposed to be implementing. Your board powers are not unlimited, so you need to know what those limitations are. For example, most governing documents, but not all, allow the board to adopt the operating budget, and it does not require the approval of the members. But some governing documents require members to approve their operating budget every year. Well, that's a big deal. So you have to have that operating budget, have a meeting where you present that budget and have the unit owners, or in the case of a co-op, the co-op members approve the budget before you can even move forward with implementation. And that's always difficult because the members of the community don't have all the information that you have regarding the expenses, the past operating deficits, the future anticipated expenditures, whether they be capital or operating, that are going to affect, budget increases, and putting all that information together in a coherent fashion and getting it approved by the membership can be a real challenge. So you need to know from the very beginning of your service on the board what that is, what those responsibilities are, and what requires the approval of the membership. A great example of something that is beyond your power, although you may have the power to implement rules and regulations, adopt rules and regulations, and then send them out to the membership once they're ready to be implemented. You, for the most part, are not going to have the power to amend your bylaws. Co-ops sometimes do, but condominium associations almost never have the power to amend the governing documents without the approval of a supermajority of your membership. So knowing the constraints of your powers and making sure you have a good handle on that, work with your counsel if you have any questions, is the best way to move forward. Now, one thing I'm going to say, again, each community has higher level involvement and in with their membership. So the first thing I would say is be transparent with your community. Try to include your community in your decision making so everyone in your community sees you as the decision maker doing an effective job for the community. So even though you have the power to make decisions without your community participating in that decision, let them see you during that process. Have open meetings, transparent communications about the decisions that are coming up. And so everybody understands exactly what you're doing as a board and how you are exercising your powers as board.
Thank you, Jane. All right, we're gonna go to the next slide. Panelists, we got a time crunch. We all have a lot to say, which is great. Okay, the next question is, how do we convince other owners to serve on the board so I can step down? Mira.
So I will say this has already come up in the chat. So I know we're on a time crunch. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. So Lisa already said it, common asset, right? Remind everybody that we're all in this together, right? And a single group can't run this board. So check your governing documents. In my time in this industry, most documents will say that you can step down at any time, right? So if you're just done, step down. It creates a vacuum and someone has to step up, right? But I'm going to do a little unpopular politicking, and Jane is probably going to make faces at me. But let's say you want to step down and you're worried about who's going to step up, right? I had a board who waited until immediately after their annual meeting. They called for nominations at their annual meeting, and there were none. 3 members of the board stepped down 2 days later, and the remaining 2 members of the board were able to appoint 3 new members without an election, right? Because most documents that I've ever dealt with tell you that if there is a vacancy on the board, the remaining members of the board can appoint someone, right? So that's to me the nuclear option, very Machiavellian, and it's fun for me to say those things, but put it out in advance. This longtime board member wants to step down. Talk to the people. You as a board member, you know who's going to make another good board member, right? You probably already have said, Emily would probably look good in this seat. And so go to Emily privately. Tell her, I'll work with you next year. Run for the board. I'll work with you next year, all through the year, and I'll make it good for you. We'll make it right. We'll get it set up so that you can step in easily. That's my best piece of advice. Identify your people in advance. Look at your committee members. If you're lucky enough to be in a community that has committees, look at their committee members. They're already invested in it, right? This is a little unorthodox as well. Look at the last person who purchased, because right after purchase is when you are most interested in your association, right? If you've lived in your association for 20 years, it's de rigueur. I don't care anymore. Do what you want to do. But that new owner is like, I'm so excited and there's a board and I want to be on it and let me do it, right? So they might not know what's going on in the association, but that's really good for your association, right? The fresh eyes, while I love a longtime board member, I can't say it enough. Thank you for volunteering your time. The new eyes may show you, the longtime funding deficit that everybody's pushed under the rug, for example. Or did you guys notice the step crack in the back of the building? Because my homeowner inspection noticed that. So I will say target the newbies, because a lot of times that's the person that's the most interested in the association. And then, like I said, there are nuclear options. Check your governing documents for what those are, and talk to your CAM. Often also your association manager also knows, Emily would be good, but Lisa also seems very interested. Like your community manager may be fielding the questions from people and not even telling you, just taking care of it and knowing it, but they know the people that are interested, because that's the important part. You don't need to know. I can teach you financials. Lisa can teach you financials. I can't teach you financials. Sarah Steele can teach you about your capital expense stuff. But if somebody is interested in your association, that is the most important thing to have in a board member, is somebody who's going to take the time and invest their knowledge into the building. So those are my little piece of advice. Feel free to email me. I think the last slide has our emails. Feel free to email me if you want me to dive any deeper into any of those responses, but I know we're on a time crunch. So
Thank you, Mira. I think that was a good good answer despite the time crunch. All right, next question is for Jane. What's the best way to maintain decorum at a board meeting? And can we limit the time an owner and a board member may speak on an issue? Oh, Jane, you're on mute. Uh-oh.
Sorry. I don't need to waste those precious minutes. This is I'm going to make very short shrift of this because it's a really long answer. Most communities have been getting this wrong for years. If they're having problems with the board meetings, it really is something because you're a community. You're not just a board of directors. These are your neighbors and your friends, and you've always done your meetings in a way that you want to make sure everybody gets to participate and they get to talk and they're so they have their meetings in a way that we want to have open and transparent parent meetings, except for executive session. So we want that open to all your members. It's very important. But you can't let the members of your community who are not board members impede the board from being able to do its business. It's got to have time to make decisions. You got big decisions to make for your community. So it's really a discipline thing. And I've worked with many boards and work with them on, here, let's do it this way. Make sure very upfront, you let the board know, get on a program, and you can ease into it if you need to. But get on a program where you said, this is the agenda for our meeting. We're sticking to our agenda. We're going to have an open forum portion at the first, after we approve our minutes, the first thing before we get into new business is going to be open session. And you give 10 minutes are set aside for people, and they're given 2 minutes each, depending on how big your community is, to ask questions or make comments or whatever. And then you get into your new business and you run through your agenda and just, stick to your schedule. Because the persons, who have good information they want to share, but they have to understand that they, you have to be, your time is precious. You're a volunteer. You're doing hard work for the rest of the community. So you need to keep your board meetings extremely organized, limit any kind of interruptions, and move forward with the agenda for your meeting in a very organized fashion with time allocated for each topic so you can be an effective board. And we do board training that helps us discuss this issue, and I'm sure that EJF has services like that. So please take advantage of that if you're having trouble, running your meetings in an effective manner.
Thank you, Jane. All right, next question is for Sarah Steele. If the reserve study says we need to contribute X towards reserves, why does the board sometimes use Y in the budget? Shouldn't we always follow the reserve study?
So Lisa and Mara already gave great advice related to your reserve study and funding the reserves. It is an essential component to the health of your building to make sure that you have the available funds to keep your building in the condition it needs to be. So again, reserve studies are there to provide a guide to you as to what you should be planning for, because eventually it's going to need to be replaced. If I have worked with associations before to take the reserve study and develop a strategic plan, and if they already have a healthy reserve, sometimes you'll find that they'll pull back on the funding or not increase by percentage each year that perhaps the reserve study had noted. But most often it's just because they don't want to cause physical discomfort for the owners in the building. It's an unfortunate thing, because too often I have seen new homeowners face the ramifications of previous owners and previous boards' decisions, and it's really a difficult conversation to have with a young person who's bought their first home in a condominium, and then all of a sudden 2 months later owes, 6 months later owes, $15,000 because of an issue that's come up. So it really is quite essential to make sure that you are putting in the appropriate funding and to have that strategic plan in place so that things don't take you by surprise.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, next one is for Jane Rogers. Our association is from the 1980s. We have amended and reinstated our governance documents once. How often should a community consider updating their documents to be in line with current laws?
There is no fixed rule. In other words, there's no standard like every 5 years that you should look at this, but you really need to do it periodically. If you have counsel who's worked with your community for a while, they often can alert you to things that they might recommend certain changes because of legal developments in your jurisdiction and involving your particular kind of community association. For example, there's been a lot going on in DC and a lot of because of the rising insurance rates, particularly for water damage claims. Many associations are considering amending the insurance provisions of their documents to allow deductibles to be charged to a unit owner where the source of the leak is the unit. There's statute in that regard under the Condo Act 42-1903.10, but that may be changing over time. But in other words, what's going on, usually a change in the statute is not necessarily require you to amend your governing documents, but sometimes a change in the economic climate or general other laws that are not specifically designed to address community associations can trigger a requirement, a need to amend your documents to respond to those forces that are impeding the board's ability to keep costs down and run the community effectively. So take a look at it every 2-3 years, or if something comes up, check with your counsel and they may have recommendations that'll help you.
Thank you, Jane. Just want to be cognizant of the time. We do have about 10 minutes left, and we still have a number of pre-submitted questions to get through. So I think what we're going to do is get through what we can to 1 o'clock, and then all the Q&As that you guys submitted, we'll figure out how to push out answers to you guys either by, when we submit the slides for everyone, so that you can have our answers to those questions, and maybe consider doing another one of these in the near future because we have a lot of good questions from our boards. So, okay, let's go on to the next question. Lisa, this is for you. Why do I pay so much for my assessments?
Can you forward to my list of what they cover? It's so everybody can see, so we can be more speedy through the discussion. Basically, it is because costs are rising and these expenses are shared amongst everybody who lives in the unit. So, it's not an individual home, it's a whole building. So we have a shared responsibility to keep the building running, keep the lights on, keep it insured, keep it, the landscaping up. And these costs can increase over time, just like any other cost. So the short answer is we pay so much for assessments because it is the cost of maintaining that which we want in our building, that's which we need in our building. And then, the legal things, like we have to have insurance and we have to have these things. So short answer is because we need services in the building. The other pieces of it would be, reserve funding, and market inflation is, since the pandemic, has been significant, right? Deferred maintenance creates a lot of issues. If we don't deal with a thing, like Sarah says, if you see water on the wall, address it now. Caulking is less expensive than ripping down the whole wall and putting up a new wall. Deal with it now. Don't defer those things. If you see water, say something, right? And then there are also new requirements, which we have to adhere to too. So short answer is because it is our responsibility to maintain and operate this shared asset that we all live in.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, next question is for Jane. What document is most efficient outside of a written will to expedite the exchange of shares and ownership to next of kin or listed person in DC in the event of a death in DC? It's a good question.
Oops. That's a good question, but it doesn't have an answer. It really depends on your individual circumstances, and you really should try to reach out to an estate planning attorney to give you the right advice for you, because each different form of ownership, a cooperative has a lot different sort of situation, for example, than if you're a condominium owner. There are transfer on death forms that can be used for condominium ownership. But remember, anything transferring from the original ownership in a cooperative has to be approved by the cooperative. You can't just do that. Revocable trusts and other instruments can be used, but you really need, this is so fact-based. There's not one right answer to this question. It would take me about 20 minutes to sort of get through them all. So that's the best I can do for today.
That's a good short answer. All right. Next question is for Lisa. How should the board balance aggressive delinquency collection with the need for community compassion?
Okay. There we go. Always a hard question because these are our neighbors and, we all live in the same building. But the bottom line is, we all agreed when we bought into this shared asset that we live in to pay our fair share. And so we have to do that in order to keep the association running properly and within that which we decided we should pay. So it's fair. It's the right thing to do. Those are the reasons to be aggressive, right? Everybody agreed to this. It's fair. It's the right thing to do. But you also do have to balance that with sometimes personal situations create a problem. So let's think about, from that, let's think about flexibility. Let's think about utilizing payment plans and seeing progress and allowing that progress to allow this person to continue to live their life in addition to participating in the community. So it is a balancing act. If you have a habitual non-payer, I'm not so compassionate. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. But if you have a situation where you have someone has a problem, you want to respect that. You want to work with them. But on the same hand, you also have to apply these over the same to every homeowner. So you can't favor one homeowner over another. So it's a balancing act. It's a take it as it comes and talk about it as a board and make a decision and take them as they come. So financial and social stability is important for the association. But so is, but financial stability can't be compromised for the financial health of the association.
Thank you, Lisa. And I would also just add to that, if a board is weighing whether to put someone into collections or offer a payment plan, definitely talk with legal counsel first and make sure you fully understand what are the benefits of each, right? And know which option works best for you.
And that's also something that the CFM team can help with as well, Emily, in terms of how to move forward with that. There are tools now that we have available to us to help with that. So reach out to your CFM.
All right, next question is for Jane. As a new board member, please explain our liabilities and what protections we have as a volunteer for these positions. Does insurance cover us, et cetera? And this may be the last question that we cover here for today. But again, we'll submit everything through email, and also you can go to our webinar page at any time and see the recording of this and get the slides. All right, go ahead, Jane. Thank you.
My quick answer, and it's going to be the quick answer because at the end of it, we're out of time, is that almost all governing documents give you a specific indemnification. In other words, if something happens and you're a board member and the board is sued, the governing documents, you're indemnified by the association. They're required to pay for your defense and pay for any liability. But you're also protected by your D&O coverage that you should have for every single board should have directors and officers coverage, insurance coverage that would cover you. And finally, as long as you're exercising your powers properly, within the business judgment rule. You're making decisions as anyone would think would be reasonable decision that comes before the board, and you're not doing something crazy. You should be covered. And you're not likely to be found individually liable unless you're really involved in some malfeasance.
Awesome.
Quick answer.
Thank you, Jane. That was quick. And that brings us right up to the 1 o'clock mark. I know I think we had about 3 more questions, 2 questions left. So I'm sorry for those that we didn't get to today. But we will definitely be figuring out how to distribute any of the Q&A that came through in the chat. So please, if you have a question, go ahead, submit it. Because I'll have access to it and we'll figure out how to distribute our answers there. But really appreciate everyone, all you board members taking the time to submit questions in January. We hope you found this helpful. Thank you to our panelists for taking time out of your day to join in this conversation. I enjoyed it. And hopefully we'll be doing this again soon. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Hi.